Finally, 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 I've been spending the last 10 minutes trying to get on, fighting with YouTube, fighting with the computer, fighting with my wife who wanted to come here just now because she's had a disaster outside because the water blew up and everything's in her garden. And I had to say, I have to go on. So, and I'm supposed to be at my live stream. But, people are saying, well, what aren't you doing anyways? No one's going to be there. One or two people. So that's it. Welcome once again to the Friday live stream. Last week I was not here because I had a kidnap. I was kidnapped by a friend, as I said in my pre-recorded thing of that I gave last week. This week, there's not really much to report. I'm grading my Constitution class. That's that. I still haven't done my Aristotle anthropology thing. I have still do that. I've been bad scholar. I've been busy doing things. I caught up on some recordings of Aristotle for the Aristotle thing, but I still have to finish. I have basically 3 to 4 more recordings for book 9, and then the 9 recording. So I have about, ultimately, I think 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Only 4 to 5 more recordings on book 9. And then we are looking at book 12 has 9 chapters or 9 recordings, with the last chapter 9 being the longest. On next week, I'll be giving a paper at week after next. I'll be giving a paper about the Constitution, or about what we call a presentation on the prerequisites for a Constitution, using the American example. But that's going to be, and I hope to record it, and I hope to present it, because I might have to write a paper about it later. Well, that's some of my 2 things. I'm going to have a busy summer, I think, really busy summer. That's kind of the chaos of what happened. So about the big incident, the thing that this week I saw was the academic agents of Parvini's being interviewed by Ed Dutton, the Jolly Heretic, and he gave a large portion of it an open content on YouTube, which I was surprised, because usually he reserves so much of the content, and it was basically a very good. I think Dutton is a good interviewer in many ways, and Parvini did was kind of more open and responsive than sometimes he is. I think this was a good occasion. He talked about his literary background and the origins of his literary background as a literary academic and coming on the web, which I think he's right in that sense. And I think he underplayed his role in helping Sargon, the Sargon connection, which I think now today he wants to distance himself from. His current position is much more different than the position he had when he got when he, just as 2015, 2014, 2016, when he was kind of with the Sargon, kind of not responding and editing and kind of correcting Sargon's mistakes. In fact, this is, I think, in many ways, AA was a teacher, became kind of a very useful educator for Sargon in that sense, of Akkad in that sense. So therefore, the interview was a very good interview, and I was surprised. I didn't see the later part. It would have been more interesting to go into the discussion of the elite theory that he did. Dutton does this, populist delusion, and that he goes into that in the question of elite. And I think this would be a very good topic to kind of address Parvini. Is his understanding of elite theory correct, or does he overstate it? And I think that is something I have a video review of the Populist Delusion out there. I was supposed to write a review, but the people kind of backed out of it. They didn't want it because they said, "Oh, this is a kind of a not serious press." The Vogelin View wanted to do it originally, but then they kind of backed away from it. I wrote the earlier book that he wrote, The Conditions for Freedom, which he kind of he uses the name Condition of Freedom is the book by Burnham. That is the book that is his realism book. This becomes his elite theory book. The Conditions of Freedom is the book title of Burnham's book, which he deals with the Italian school writers, Machiavelli and like this. So it's very funny that the last academic book that Parvini wrote for Palmgrave Macmillan, Palmgrave, was in many ways the theme, the title of the book, which focused more on the book itself, focused on libertarian kind of Austrian school and liberalism and the critique of liberalism and the dangers it directed. It was kind of a defense of freedom. It was kind of his Austrian school last hurrah in this sense. And I wrote a review of that book at the time for Vogelin View, and it's still out there available. You can go check it. You can find it for those of you who want to go look at Vogelin View. It's one of my reviews. I had criticisms of it, and that is his defense of Locke. He really defended Locke, and I think you can see the difference. We can see his reactionary move from the time he wrote Conditions of Freedom to the kind of blackpilling. And this is a time when he's losing his academic job, not losing, but giving up on it in that sense. That he was making more money through his YouTube, deciding to create the academic agency, which is selling courses and things, particularly the courses he did as a teacher, making those more available and making more money selling the course as a course and that he got as a lecturer at a state university and whatnot, and not having to face the vindictive characteristic of the woke left who started to target him. Now, I understand that some people blame President Sunday for this. I don't think Sunday had any ill will in this, but at the same time, Sunday had problems with AA and some of the things. But that's how I met Sunday. Sunday was surprised that someone like me was watching AA. It's not that I liked AA. I mean, I thought AA was interesting. He was very much an interesting phenomenon of a literary scholar, of the traditional literary bent, of the methodologies of things like this, the methodologies of the new story, breaking from the Marxism, feminism, and new historicism, but not having a clear ideology. What was so shocking was what I found very interesting is that his complete ignorance of voices in America that was also using Shakespeare for the kind of things he was doing, the political analysis and things like this. The Straussians and some non-Straussian, but people that echo the Straussians. Someone like Paul Cantor, who was likewise connected with the Mises people. That is a perfect example of someone that AA might have had a good correspondence with. They have very similar kind of, a literary scholar who embraces both economics and political philosophy, who then goes to discuss popular culture as Paul Cantor did. Now, Paul Cantor died like a year or so ago. It's a great loss. He was old, in his 70s and not always the best of health. But he was giving courses. He was kind of retiring from Virginia, but still kind of teaching, being invited by Harvey Mansfield and the people associated with Mansfield's the constitutional program at Harvard to give courses and give lectures at Harvard. on Shakespeare. In fact, these are variable. You can go look at Paul Cantor's Shakespeare's lectures. They're online and they're very much available on YouTube. So I mean, I would recommend this, but also his published works. Now, I mentioned Cantor because Cantor and AA are kind of the same, but the problem is following. You can see that the development of economics and politics, and I would even say primarily because of what I said in my video last week about what I call the Austrian school author Hans Hoppe. I can never get his name right. Hope. The dark and radical turn that Hoppe take is a black pilling. Had a black pilling effect, both on Yarvin and to a degree also on AA, because of his association with both Hoppe himself and connected with people like Yarvin. So I know this repeats some of the things I said last week, but I thought it would be good to kind of just hit it because I think the interview didn't really go into this. I think Ed doesn't really understand political. I like Ed very much. He's a good cultural anthropologist / study student, scholar of religion / evolutionary psychologist who looks at evolutionary biology as a political and the behavioral aspect of it and that stuff. And I think that's good. But his understanding of politics, although he has a kind of innate, natural, from his own family experience, a conservative, English conservatism, English understanding of politics, his background is not political thought in that sense or political science. So sometimes he misses nuances that really could have dealt with this. And he doesn't understand Austrian economics. I don't think he has a good background in Austrian economics. And then in the variations of these liberal economic schools on the right, that AA kind of was recruited in. This is where, as a young conservative scholar, I was welcome to various conservative conferences on economics, libertarian / Austrian economics that were being held both in UK and the United States at George Mason University through IHS and through the Mises Center itself in Alabama. So this is kind of, I would say, to understand the trajectory of what Parvini AA went through is a good understanding. Now, why am I talking about AA? Well, I think this is was a good interview. I thought it was well done. I thought it was insightful. I am kind of waiting for the Boomer Truth book to come out. If he's going to produce a Boomer Truth book, I would, like I said, I would critique it in a certain way. I think there's a problem with understanding it generationally. At one level, generational analysis is interesting. It has validity, but on another level, it's too problematic because it tends to lump political cultures and generational differences that are very specific per a culture or region. And the only thing that homogenizes it is the internet culture. So that the creation of internet culture, which is not, again, this would lead us to the question of, is the internet a real viable community or platform of creating a political society, a political class? Again, engaging with someone like Benedict Anderson's book, Imagined Communities, which the construction of how constructions of communities emerge. This is and I think this is something, the problem of Gemeinschaft, Gesellschaft, which is a very current, a fundamental problem of political form and human being connectivity in that sense, is still something would like to address on. But that's it. I'm not going to go into more of that. I just wanted to mention that was a good thing to talk about. I had no real plans to talk about anything today. I just promised to do a live stream, and I said I'd do it to people. I see one or two people here. They're going to be back and forth. What to do? I mean, tomorrow, I'm going to be in my Plato Republic, the reading group I'm in. We're finishing Plato's Law books, the second half of book 9 of the book 9 of the Laws. which is interesting in that sense, but I think people are going to be absent. One of the things I was reading, I was joking on my Facebook, my wife told me, I was this last weekend on the May holidays, Cinco de Mayo, on 5th of May, I was really getting into reading, going over just Cicero's On Duties. And I think Cicero's On Duties is probably one of the more books that maybe people should look at again. It is about ethics. It is the question of duties, which is the duties and obligations of moral duty. It is written at a time of the breakdown of the Republic, so you couldn't rely on it's written to his son. And the reason why he's writing to his son, who's now going to study with the Greeks, is a question of duty and how to behave and what is required moral duty in that sense, ethical duty of correct action, how to behave it, what is just and what is the proper function of a human being in these things. And he feels the need to write this because the Republic and the laws which would shape the character of people, who did shape the character of people in the Republic of past, is now been destroyed by Caesar. And the Republic is no longer there, and that the city is corrupted, and you can't rely on the civic functions to educate. And therefore, he writes this book as a kind of an education. Some people, this is what we call mirror print. This is some people will point to this as a kind of form of mirror princess. Now, we compare this to, let's say, Xenophon's Sarpeideia, which is the education of Cyrus, right? Which is kind of the masterpiece of what we call the mirror princess. Some people would argue the prince is as much responding to on duties. Machiavellian's prince is responding, we're responding to what Cicero is doing here in On Duty than to anything else. And in Cicero here on Duties gives the most powerful, some of the most powerful understanding, following Aristotle, about the condition of man and what in other words, the classical perception of man as a social animal, and how that social animal, or how is he a social animal, explains nature, the role of nature in shaping human flourishing. And the connections of man's obligation, how man's nature leads us to them to be a social and political animal, and how it also is a truth-seeking animal. And I think in many ways now this is a work that, even though it goes in directions that Aristotle would be a little leery of, but at the same time it goes into an area of that is basically following in the Aristotelian ethics, the footsteps of the Aristotle's ethics. It is less developed. It is completely, it's structurally different than this. It's the ethics is Aristotle's ethics, as we know, is kind of a course where he's dealing with the themes. That's kind of like class notes in that sense. It's lectures and points about this and analysis of arguments of it. It's not really addressed. The question is it really addressed to gentlemen? Who's it addressed to? The audience of the ethics is a big question. That's why we have two books of Aristotle's ethics, the Eudemony ethics, and the argument is one refers to the Nicomachean ethics, relies more on poetry and references to poetry. Therefore, we argue this is for the more leisurely gentleman, whereas the Eudemonian ethics is referring more to analytical arguments and less to poetry, and therefore more to the philosophically or scientifically inclined, the analytically inclined. So therefore, the two texts are, two books, kind of with two radically similar arguments, similar structure. I mean, to some degree, eight books in the Eudemonian ethics versus the 10 books of the Nicomachean ethics. The 8 books in the ethics echoes the 8 books in the politics. So this is why some people argue that it's the peer book to the politics is not the Nicomachean ethics, but the Eudemonian ethics. Some might argue because the equalness of books, right? There's the similarity of book structure. That's how one way. But other people say no. But look at the book 9 of chapter 9 of book 10, which clearly is a transition to politics. But at the same time, No, it's a transition to legislation, not politics in that sense. So it's a very odd thing. And we have to remember that the common books are shame. So therefore, what's 5, 6, and 7 in the Nicomachean ethics is I think if it's 4, 5, and 6 in the um, and in the Eudaimonia ethics with the chapters on friendship and then being smaller and more compact. The book on penmanship would be more compact than I think 9 deals with. So I mean, I haven't really examined for anyone here the Eudaimonia ethics as we're going through the Nicomachean ethics, and part of me is kind of wanting to do that now more because of this. But again, back to Cicero. Why Cicero? Cicero is probably like I said, the most political. It is the most thorough, even though this book is not really dealing with offices, and even they're called the offices. We would think that okay, these are the offices one is doing, but rather this is a book about the collapse, and that maybe this is a book that is fitting for our time because of its dealing with the collapse of political systems and how do you educate people how when the political system is corrupt and collapsing, you can't rely on the political system to train, because in other words, to be the educative force, to shape your children and to make sure that they know how to behave well as a good man, a good human being, and also a good citizen. In that sense, what is the good citizen? What is the sad part of modern civic life is that the public structures no longer educate you to be a beneficial citizen to your regime or your structure. Rather, it makes you a partisan agent of overthrowing every regime. Every relatively stable regime or decent regime one has is now seen as unjust and illegitimate and must be radicalized and must be dismissed. And therefore, the question is that an idealism that, in other words, the social justice idealism of the left ultimately corrodes the perception. Now, this is a problem because some elements argue that this progressive left social justice reality, which at one level comes from a cosmopolitan view, which is associated with a neoliberal position, but also with Marxism, right? This combination of neoliberal, cosmopolitan, economic, human rights conception, at the same time as the Marxist, revolutionary, Bolshevik kind of throwing aside of the what we call the middle class bourgeois life, okay, an embracement of a perfect view of justice, utopian view of justice, and a radical critique of the present and the existing structures that are often too impossible. That once you reject this, what is going to be the replacement? What is the replacement? And there's not going to be. And so, therefore, some people would argue that the Stoics are kind of, if we turn to the Stoics in their cosmopolitanism, this is corrosive. Cicero is a very interesting person because Cicero shows that there cannot be a cosmopolitanism in the sense, unless you refer to Rome and an empire, but even that is problematic for Cicero. He thinks that's, this is not really achievable in any real meaningful sense. That the patriot of your country is, in other words, there's limits in the love. In other words, the human being needs a country. It needs a place. It needs a people. It needs a household. It needs a family. It needs and that human beings are attracted towards that by nature. It is towards the family, then towards the kin group, and then towards the village or the community you're living in, and then to the political community that you're in, and then to the ethnoi of the larger structures, and then to the human genos, the human people. That this is the things that, but the strength, and this is why agreeing with Aristotle that the civic order is that natural balance where human fulfillment and the potentiality of being human maximizes its possibility. in that sense. And that therefore we find ourselves in our sense in the political, in the sense that the political community is that basis by which there is this connection. Now, this is something interesting. This is something that I've been discovering in the current readings of looking at book 9 of the Ethics, where he talks about the market. About, he has this weird chapter on goodness. I mean, goodwill, harmony, on homonoia, goodwill, equity in that sense, and which are very interesting because it almost say, well, is this a market analysis? And then his market analysis then says, well, no, it's political analysis. That therefore the market, where the marketplace and the agora are kind of the same thing in a sense. The forum and the agora are kind of a simultaneous structure, as in the modern conception, state and society in that sense. This is the interconnectivity, and that therefore the exchange, the means that make economic life in the market workable and regulatable and effective and efficient and equitable is not only the mechanism of money, instruments of state money, not private money in the Hayekian kind of this idea, we're going to get this pure money, non-state money, but it is the political, it's the crown, it's the order of justice. In other words, there is the issue of money also must be the issue of law. There is this double-folded aspect of nomos, and in other words, law and custom, but of the community, but also of money, the currency, money, not property, nothing but money in that sense. And that is the basis of that there is a tie to the particular regime, the particular community, the particular structure, and this is what holds the common together. This is what holds the market, holds the common together in a certain way. It provides a common in that sense, that they are shared, and that therefore they're able to get benefit. They're able to achieve a common benefit in that sense. So this is a very interesting point. Now, why then turn to Aristotle? Why not go back to my point about Cicero? Well, Cicero doubles down on that also. It explains the notion of nature. So I think this was kind of a good, interesting reading for Sunday. I'm going to go read it. I'm getting to the point where I think I must do a video after the Plato. No, after I tackle the recording. I said after the Aristotle, I'm going to do the Prince. I mean, after this Aristotle's Name of the Ethics, I'm going to do the Prince again. Okay, I promise that I would. I promise people to do that. I will do that. I'll get this done this summer. It will be 27 recordings. I think unlike the current existing one, it has like a 28 because I broke down some. One long chapter was broken in two because of a problem. That is going to be the structure of what we do for the reprinting. But after that, I'm struggling. What do I want to do? I want to kind of do the human ethics. I want to do the rhetoric. This is kind of like, do I want to do the rhetoric or not? But then I also thinking I must do the Cicero on on duties, because I think this is a very good book. Now, people said, why don't you do, you showed us that little book on friendship. Why don't you just do that thing? And I thought that, okay, yeah, that's it. See, the problem with doing both Cicero now, that little speech alone on the friendship would be, and Amica, would be very difficult to do. Because why? Because it's one small speech and you can break it up. There's no breaking up. There's no logical, natural breaks in it. It would be too long. It'll be an hour, 2 hour long read through and analysis of maybe 2 or 3 hours. And that's, maybe I don't want to do that for video. I mean, how can I break it up? And the same problem here is with the structure of the Diopheces, divided in 3 books. Now I could break up each book into 3 parts, but that would be just, and do 9 videos, maybe 9, 10 videos for it. That could be a doable thing, but that would be still longish. In other words, it's not like the ethics or the politics would have clear breaks, and or you could do these shorter videos in that sense. Well, that's it. I mean, that's been my frustration on this, and I wanted to talk to you about that in that sense, and maybe get feedback from people. What do they want? What's so interesting about the classical world? This is why Plutarch is wonderful. Plutarch's Lives. I think the Dresden edition of Plutarch's Lives is probably the only one I would recommend people to use, even though it's archaic. The language is completely archaic, but it's the same. In other words, everything is the same translator, using different versions and different translation, more modern translations. The problem is that the words are not consistent. Translations are not consistent. So it's going to be very difficult to do the cross comparison that you could do. I've always wished someone would do a new translation of the Plutarch's Lives, complete translation, even if it's John Sachs, but Sachs is busy doing his Plato now. I think he's going to, I don't know what he's doing. I think he's retired, and he's maybe not, his brother, I think, died recently, and I think maybe it's been kind of like he's probably not the best of health. I don't know what's going on. I don't talk to him. I don't communicate with him that much. I haven't communicated over a decade, so therefore who knows what's going on. And I think he focused on Homer. I think he did like the Iliad, Odyssey. He did the Odyssey. I think he published the Odyssey translation. He did the Republic and a couple of dialogues, the Gorgias, with the rhetoric, Aristotle's rhetoric. Maybe he's doing the Oregon, the science books. I don't know. I was hoping that C.D. Reeves would do the Oregon, the six or the classic books of science by Aristotle. So I don't really know what's going on here in that sense with translation. Plutarch. Plutarch's Lives is one of those great books in that sense of understanding psychology, the political psychology of people in that sense, and the contextualize that every person using Aristotelian ethics, understanding the question of character, the different character traits of a person, and then seeing how they developed, how they grew, how they matured, how they developed, and then how they made just kind of decisions they were, and contextualizing them in two different regimes. One is the Greek cities, and then the other time that of the Romans Republic and the Roman context. And therefore, you get to see the two different contexts and then see how similar characteristics happen in different type of political systems. The ambition, the characteristics, the magnanimous versus those who are seeking greatness versus those who are liberal, those who are versus good judgment, those who are both virtue and vice in that sense. Is characteristic of this in Plutarch. You get to see each actor's qualities and his character, and how the character affected in the regime, and how it shaped the regime or the political order that he was in, or then how the regime shaped him or them in that sense, and then what how did the choices he made consequence and affect the regime in that sense. And again, this is why the Plutarch's Lives is probably one of the most important books to understand political psychology that there is out there. This is why I always had D. Alvarez's lecture course on this was wonderful, and more people should do it. Like of D. Alvarez, Leopold D. Alvarez at the University of Dallas is now no longer teaching, retired, and those who took over the course didn't change. They changed it dramatically in that sense. So. The course was Political Regimes 2, right? This was where Plutarch. It was a weird book class where Plutarch was taught in the first half, the first significant part, then Augustine, City of God, sections from not the whole City of God, but the key central chapters on the City of God, and then the Machiavelli's Prince was his famous examination of this, but then. This led to people wanting more of Plutarch and more of the Prince. Some people wanted more of this Augustus, but most people wanted, and that was kind of like his graduate course on this was, I was told, was very well received by people in his transcripts about this, the Alvarez, the Plutarch course. I don't know what to say now. I'm kind of really at the crux of all the points I wanted to address today. There's not really much to do. Not much more to say in that sense. I don't really have things to add. I thought, right. My voice is not that loud as it should be, perhaps. I don't know. It's the allergies, I think. The allergies are kind of getting to me. But who cares? It's not important in that sense. I got no feedback from people this last week. I was surprised to maybe get some feedback or suggestions. I read the suggestions in last week's class. Last week's, not the Friday live stream thing. And I think I don't really have any more things to say. I could talk about I talked about AA. That was the big thing, really. I watched this weekend. I don't want to go on to the post politics because it's kind of like my wife was talking about it with people, and they're kind of like everyone's down and they think there's going to be a big reaction. Everyone is going to get waiting for the government is manipulating things. I sent a couple questions. Oh yeah, you sent a couple things this morning. I don't see you. Okay, I'm sorry, Corlitz. I apologize. Let me be a good boy and do that then. But I'll say the thing about the government. The government is delaying the bills, the energy and gas bills that are going to be massive increases due to the European issues of the so-called Green New Deal. And I think there's been a kind of a conspiracy in the sense that the government is terrified that if the bills hit before, like hit in May, or before the election happens, European elections, what will happen is that there'll be a massive backlash against the government parties and the coalition parties in the European Parliament. And so much so that the prime minister did something really weird. He basically he forced 3 of his ministers to run, basically give up their give up their ministerial post and go into the a Euro Parliament to help improve the KO's platform, the government and the coalition platform. Okay. Now, Corlitz has sent me a thing 4 hours ago. I didn't notice this. I didn't see it. I didn't see it when I was earlier. He said, I listened to with Michel Guichet, where he discussed the developing place of human rights, and it sounded similar to the next book, and I think that's right. It is. There is the overlap between those two on that. I was wondering to what extent the issue might be causing some black pilling with democracy at Pleasant. I've seen. Well, no, I don't think people like. To be honest, Yarvin doesn't read, and even Yarvin does not read Guichet. I don't think. Maybe he does, but I don't get that. He's more clearly Hans Hermann Hoppe. He is more influenced by Hoppe and this kind of economic modeling and this rational scientific argument, with a little bit throwing in of what's his name, that English writer that he likes, Carlyle, which is, post-romantic kind, darkness, with a little bit of, Germanic thinking thrown in, not French, not what I call the new liberalism or the new right of the French of Guichet and Manet. I think there is this problem. There is something in Manet about the danger of human rights. Manet's book on human rights is interesting, and in fact, I would even recommend you people look at Dan Mahoney's book on a book of a couple years ago on the religion of humanity. Manet's position on humanity is actually very much at a very important thing of this. In fact, I'm waiting for the delivery today of my first two volumes of the Guichet, his book, this 4-volume set of Michael Guichet's thing on liberalism, the advancement of the democracy, books 2 and 3. I have to hold off on 3 and 4 because I have to 2 and 3. I want to read 2 and 3 first before I really take down 3 and 4. Now, Corlet's in the things in the note on that's found in last week's not the Friday live stream. I've been also reading the 3rd volume of L'Avancement of Democracy on totalitarian era, which is that important part of his analysis that fascism, communism, and Nazism present an attempt to recreate the sacred unity typically of religious societies, but with a basis drawn from within liberalism. I think that's right. That's Guichet. This reminded me of Vogelin's idea of political. Okay, it is. There is this similarity of this. Vogelin's idea of political liberalism the political religion is found in his 1930 book at the time. I think 32 book, 30, oh no, 30, I forget. When is the political religion book? Is this before he gets kicked out of the country? Austria has to flee Austria. Let me just do this. I want to get the right date. I don't want to talk through my hat. The political religion book the Die politische Religion, published in Stockholm in 1939, and then reissued by Nehme in München in 1996. Okay, the German original, which is part different. It's translated and published in the multi-volume collecting series. It is part of volume 5, the Modernity Without Restraint of the collected works, which has not only the political religions, it also has the famous lectures, Chicago lectures, the New Science of Politics, and a small little volume that was published by Regenry, a series of essays on science, politics, and Gnosticism. The volume 5 is edited by Manfred Hensing, one of his Vogelin's Munich students, one of his Munich doctorates. Hensing, and then got a job in Hawaii. I remember he was kind of a liberal child of the left, German left, STP. Many of Vogelin's German students. This is what Heinrich Myers used to shock me, saying that Vogelin's German students were mostly leftists, social democrats, anti-Nazi, that shared his anti-Nazi attitudes. But back to Vogelin's conception of religion to respond to Corlitz's question to me. about Duchette's using of it, about the religion, about how fascism and communism. I would argue fascism and Nazism more than communism. Communism didn't really try. Maybe in the Stalin period during the war, he used religion to kind of do this. And yes, it's the communal. The communism is the longing for this primitive community. There's a good Yak book. I think it's Bernard Yak's first major book that deals with this. The longing for community. Oh God, let me get this. I'm sorry. Bernard Yak of Brandeis. Yeah, come on, computer. Come on. Yeah, The Longing for Total Revolution. That was the first book. He was a famous, he was a student at Harvard of Scalar. The Longing of French Revolution, Total Revolution, 1986. This was his first book, and he deals with this conception. I think this is a very important book in that sense. It explains the philosophic sources of the long title, the philosophic sources of social discontent from Rousseau to Marx and Nietzsche, right? This is the radical discontent. This is published by University of California Press, 1986, was published in 2002. The 1992 original edition first, but it was even earlier than that. It was 1986 also, if I remember correctly. It was really first published. Yeah, it was originally published in 86, then 92, the mass market paperback version of it, then 90s, and then now 2012. Why am I bringing that? Because that Yak's book on modernity echoes the modernity without restraint conception that Voglin's trying to hit on. Voglin's religion of this is the problem. This is political religion is his conception of trying to get his understanding of consciousness. He just published 2 volumes on race. The 2 volumes on race, the 2 books on race, maybe even 3 books on race. Is it really 2, 3? I think it's the first book on race is 33, Rosenstadt, and then there is 2 books on race. His his book on the history of race idea from Ray to Karras. This is 1933 to both 123. These books Hannah Arendt will use to talk about the Germans' idea, the Nazis' idea of race. Vogelin is very radically seeing and disabusing of the application of race as the basis of state identity. And then he turns to his defense of the authoritarian state in 1936 in the authoritarian state, which is defense of the Austrian state against the Nazis, which collapses with the assassination of Dollfuss and the weakness of the successor of Dollfuss to stand up to the Nazi when they come, and also the change. I mean, if Mussolini was not vulnerable due to his Ethiopian adventure and needed Hitler's kind of thing, it was not weak and little in need of help. He opposed before 36 and earlier. Mussolini opposed Hitler's grab and the Nazi move into Austria. So this is a very complicated problem in the authoritarian state, and therefore this is when the book on political religion. This is the right of not the. This is written just as the Nazis are taking over Austria, the Anschluss in 1938. It's written and then he's fleeing of this, and he can't get a German publisher because he's on the Nazi list. So it gets published in Stockholm. and it's forgotten. But this idea of political religion that's in Vogelin is this turn to consciousness. This is, in fact, this reveals his move away from Stadler, state theory, that is clearly being manifest. Now, there is all this attempt that, yes, he has a consciousness. He has the first book on the American ideas, which is post-debilitation work. His first book on the, his attempt to, it's his book that he goes to America, comes back from America, and says, the common sense tradition is really interesting. This American idea of political things gives us original. He gets this kind of saying, we can avoid this Germanic rationalism and gets an experience, so that therefore this leads him to kind of reject the Kantian, neo-Kantian position of the teachers like Kelsen and things, and argue for an experience-based system of this. So this first book of Vogelin gives us the framework by which Vogelin kind of hints that he wants to escape the rationalist positivist tradition of the German Austrian thinking of the state. And we can point to that, also liberal. I mean, to understand the Stadler or the theory of state, the Allgemeine general theory of state that defines German political thinking, and particularly someone like Jelinek. I'm supposed to say Jelinek, Georg Jelinek, and I can never say Bucelli, and these fundamental texts, which are not really true. I mean, Bucelli's translation of the Allgemeine Stadler is general theory of state, is translated. It's available on websites. You can find it on the site of the book translated. It's now, but Jelenek's classic multi-volume edition of Allgemeine Stadler, general theory of the state, is not really public, and it's not constitutional law. See, the misunderstanding of the people who look at Jelenek's teaching as constitutional law. No, it is state theory. It is the idea of state, and we can see this now. People say that I argue it is Hobbesian, Lockean, but also influenced by Kant. Not so much Hegel, but by Kant. It is Kant's, direction in his metaphysics of morals on the question of Verstand des Staat. Verstand des Staat, in other words, Verstand der Recht, the science of right. And this is the political teaching in Kant. That's then tied also to his famous perpetual peace argument. And that it's the second half of the Metaphysics of Morals, and it's a book on the Metaphysics of Morals. There is not really a solid teaching of state. There's no equivalent in Kant of the closest thing you get is the Verstand des Recht, is to something in Hegel is the phenomenology, the philosophy of right, which is the lecture on philosophy of right, is the philosophy of state, the German Prussian state, and his attempt to kind of do it. Now, Hegel and Kant kind of differ in many ways in the direction out ideas, but while Kant does shape legal thinking, Hegel really doesn't that much, particularly in Germany, and the post-positivist, the positivist tradition, the neo-Kantian tradition, is very much influenced in the shaping of positivist German law and German and Austrian law in this sense. And therefore, this is what, but we have to understand, positivist law, as Austin tells us, rests in Hobbes, Bentham and Hobbes. Okay, Bentham and Hobbes, and fundamentally understood in Bentham and Hobbes. So this whole Germanic tradition of Stadler that Vogelin was trained in, remember he was more of a lawyer, constitution studies of this, and then his going to America for this experience of common sense tradition and this whole thing leads him to kind of come back with a critique. Now, this then leads him to kind of trying to form his own general theory of state, which is a failure. Now, there is some discussion of this in the literature, and if you study, there's a very interesting book about Vogelin that interviews his students and the influence of his time, and you will see it. This is I'm not sure. It's mentioned in the Autobiographical Reflections, is volume 34. His discussion of state papers, and particularly volume 7 of the published essays from 22 to 1928, will have essays on his state theory. And the peak of this is the authoritarian state, his 1930, the Authority Staat, 1936 in Vienna, published, is the thing. But with political religion, this becomes a new break. The political religion point is the break from the Stadler tradition of Vogelin. And he deals with the question of consciousness and religion. And it's the idea that political religion, in other words, that ideology becomes a political religion. But then he takes this and says, look at this, but at the same time, he's not there yet. It's with his new science of politics that he tries to, first he gets, and new science of politics is too much. And in fact, I would argue new science of politics is a mess because it tries to do a theory of representation of symbols, symbolic representation as a political forms, with symbolic forms, so kind of political symbiotics in that sense that goes in there. A conception of representation of political ideas from experience, that's this connection between how we experience forms and our phenomena and our rationality and our experience, then how ideology interferes and distorts that in a way, using the example of Gnosticism from the Christian religious experience as a specialized religion, a special knowledge that alters us, that interferes with and distorts our perception of reality. So ideology becomes a kind of a superstructure of rationality that is alternative to the actual natural one we have. So political religion for Vogelin, thus, is this conception is that starting point. The book Political Religion for Vogelin, and this is why Arendt uses it, but doesn't really like the direction he takes in the Chicago lectures, which become New Science of Politics. Strauss had a problem with the New Science because he didn't understand it. He didn't understand this kind of language, the unique technical language that Vogelin constructed about representation. That is, which for Strauss, what representation means, representation, political representation. He understood it politically, and so that how does this political representation? See, Vogelin merged the idea of epistemological representation between phenomena and conceptual things with symbiotic language, and also with political, or the embracements of political symbols. Okay, this is why Vogelin, Kendall will talk about political symbols, because it's political, that the system of representation Vogelin does allows us to look at political behavior and political activities and political phenomena and see the structures of the symbolic structures, representational structures that shape our consciousness or the people's perception and understanding of political things, of states and communities. And this is an under really developed thing, because the problem with this was we always understand Vogelin, therefore, is the new science moment, that of post-political religion, his consciousness moment here, and what is done with the concept of the political representation with Gnosticism becomes the frame that he builds his attempt to do the new orders of politics. Before the new orders of politics, yes, political religion was there, an ideology, but he wanted to do more of this kind of history of ideas. He left Germany with the attempt in the 1930s to kind of do a history of ideas, history of political thought in terms of the ideas on their own, the concepts. So he starts out with, political religion 39 to, like, it's The new science lecture becomes the key moment of transmission, which break the previous attempt of an historical conception of history of ideas is collapsed, and this system of consciousness that develops an order in history, shaped by his lectures, the new science lectures, and the confrontation with in other words, the way alternative ideology constructs rational frameworks of like Gnostic, in the way similar how Gnosticism impacted the way a Christian believer understood the divine truth, the divine world. Okay, so Gnosticism becomes the means to understand the epistemological problem that Vogelin is confronting, and that ideology shapes these things. So I could see this is where I think Bennett does take this from. Now, here's the big problem with Vogelin. Vogelin, while he's writing this, he then has his in 1966, he has his anamnesis moment, or the book on anamnesis, which really forces a radical rethinking of his conception of consciousness, and then leads to a problem that he can't really finish the new order. In other words, this leads us to the infamous volume 4 of Order and History, the Ecumenic Age, which is a very different direction. And then his last book, the last volume 5, which is done only in 87, near the end of his life, and is a very disappointing book, because he's given up. He's really, he's moved on to new things. He's gone to in other words, this weird moment at that he becomes looking at the symbolic politics. His understanding of symbolic politics leads us to the drama of humanity, which is, again, this, from the last thing he was working on. So to understand what's going on in the political religion book, and that is, I could see Guichet looking at Menet and Guichet both looking at Vogelin's critique of ideology, both in political religion. Maybe aspects of the new science, but not going fully into new science. But then for Menot, Menot is clearly influenced by Vogelin's anamnesis. Particularly on his natural right. Anamnesis does offer a critique of anamnesis, what is right by nature, this critique of positivist experiential things, the idea of experience as an authentic structure of political life. Anamnesis is a very important book because it kind of it reshapes what is started in political religion and not the new science, and kind of moves away from the language of Gnosticism and things like this, and instead focuses on experience as the thing and gives an authentic experience. See, where the Gnosticism was kind of a false experience in that sense, a false conception of experience, and therefore, like totalitarianism in that sense, totalitarianism is a kind of false consciousness, the ideology that is see, the problem with ideology is whether the ideology is a closed ideology, an alternative ideology that does not allow one to a closed system that does not that does not let the world or experience of the world correct it. The totalitarian ideology is an alternative rationality that therefore imposes its will on the world, and then how you understand the world. It is thus like it is the way to understand. It is Gnostic in the sense, in the classic sense, that it is the tools which to allow you to, only through these tools then you can know the truth, and that the world can only be understood through these terms. through these framework, through this consciousness, and that it requires special access to get into that consciousness, embracements of the ideology and shaped by the ideology. So therefore, the totalitarian mind, this is why Arendt is very interesting. You can see Arendt's discussion of totalitarianism and the way mass society and mass movement and the totalitarian structure alters rationality is very much influenced by Rogan, much more than Heidegger. This is why it's the origins of totalitarianism is very much a rejection of Heidegger in a sense, which is shocking, because then she will immediately later embrace Heidegger again in her later writing, particularly in her Via Activa or the Human Condition is very much a Heideggerian work. And her Life of the Mind is struggling with the whole question of thinking, right? Heidegger's conception of thinking, right? So I mean, the late Arendt of the origins of totalitarianism is her most farthest point away from the influence of Heidegger, and you can see her borrowing, and maybe her friendship with Jonas, who was very shaped by the Gnostic. Jonas's book on Gnosticism is very much kind of in the field, agreeing with Vogelin in this sense, but different direction. You can see, therefore, her friendship with Jonas and while she's in New York then leads her to kind of go and to see the value in Vogelin, because Vogelin is an anti-Nazi. Vogelin is a rejection of race theory. She finds much worse value in his critique of race. Vogelin is not only used on the discussion of ideology, Vogelin is also used in the discussion of race and anti-Semitism, right? On the race projections of the book. What is so amazing thus, and this, from the point of view of what you're trying to say, Gachet's third volume probably is its confrontation of the totalitarian moment, which liberalism faced due to these three challenges, the two challenges: fascism, Nazism, and communism, which ends in 1991. And therefore, this is the crux of this ideology in a sense. It's this ideological system, and the ideological system is much different. Come on, there is another book. There's someone else that I know who wrote a very good book about the difference. A Frenchman who writes. It was published by ISI too. I don't know. Can't remember the book. ISI published a translation from the French. It's not about the difference between Nazism and communism. That, in many ways, he would argue that both they're bad, but Nazism is a little worse. In that sense, it's much more inhumane, much more distortive. Both are false consciousness, but the Nazi movement is a much more radically, much more inhumane one, and much more systematic. The brutality of the Nazis went to massive systematization, where the Russians were just still more kind of crass about it. I forget the book. It's one of the authors in the Black Book of Communism too. It's a very good book in that sense. And my memory is, it's something. I go search on it. I'm just looking over here, looking at my Utopia. What is it? The book I saw it, of course, it grabbed my eye. It's Ravel, not Ravel, but it's not Ravel, but it's. I see Ravel, Jean-Francis Ravel. I remember how Roland Ravel's book in 1987, The Suicides of Democracy. It was a very influential book for me, about the suicidal nature of democracy. And I think this is that Jean-Francis Ravel, a very interesting French liberal and kind of liberal critiquer, neither non-religious, neither Jesus nor Marx, famous book in the 60s, 70s. But then in 1986, 87, the suicide of democracy, the suicide of democracy. And his last one, I I saw the corner of my eye, and now I can't see it. I saw it in the corner of my eye over here. His book on utopia is one of his last books that he wrote before he died. Um, there it is, Last Exit to Utopia, published by that Encounter. Ravel was a very interesting fellow in that sense, a liberal, real true old European liberal in that sense, like very similar to Benjamin. What is it on power? What is the papers? Jovenel. Jovenel. I mean, these are conservatives, but they're also liberals in that sense. This is why Mahoney always talks about. Dan Mahoney is, wants to talk about this liberals, this kind of liberal conservatism. This is why Mahoney is kind of not so comparable with radical right thinkers that go too far and abandoning all liberalism. This is why there's this uncomfort with the direction. This is why Mahoney has a very uncomfort with aspects of what's his name. Oh, come on. I have the book hiding here. Regime Patrick Danin. He thinks Dan and Dan, but also Peter Lawler before he died, also thought Pat went too far in '87. His book on 97, 90, was it his 2010 book on the liberalism book went too far. Was it 2010, 2012? His liberalism book went too far. Now, I don't disagree. Peter would agree that Locke is problematic. Now, Peter's famous for keeping Locke in the lockbox, right? But there's something about going too far, particularly with the Catholicism, the political Catholicism, that is in the integralism that he would befriend. What's his name? I can't. Adrian Verrill, and the position he's taking in integralism, which is kind of rejecting liberalism, boot and right, goes a little too far from Mahoney's ultimate position. And I'm in the middle here because I'm kind of sympathetic to. I'm more agreeing with Mahoney here. Maybe it's because I'm not a Catholic. I don't buy the integralism. I think the integralism, Catholicism is another globalism. Political Catholicism is a global alternative globalism that is as problematic as communism, as Nazism, as Eurasianism. These are not nationalisms. These are not. This is a cosmopolitan political order. There is something anti-national, anti-particularist in the integralist position. Ultimately, there's a schizophrenic, in the integralist position, because at the same time there is a dismiss of the liberalism of the global position of neoliberalism and liberalism. But at the same time, the Catholicism leads to a kind of globalism and cosmopolitanism as an alternative that is just as corrosive to particular nationalities and communities as anything else. So, and I think Voegelin saw that. That's the uniqueness about Voegelin. Voegelin is not a friend of Christianity. Voegelin was very critical. This is why someone like Fritz Wilhelmsen would be very critical of Voegelin, what Voegelin is up to, saying that Voegelin is kind of not necessarily a real good ally. His experience, in other words, Wilhelmsen's book on Christianity and political philosophy, his chapter criticizing Voegelin, has the critique that Voegelin's experience, in other words, the experience is more real than the reality. In other words, that the experience of a thing matters more than the truth of the thing. Or for Voegelin, the truth of experience of Paul is more important than the truthfulness of the resurrection. That's what William's going to critique, and I think there is that. There was the ultimate truthfulness of Christology is not important to someone like William. Now, this is something that in a recent piece on the Bullock, people saying, "Oh, these right-wing people are using Gnosticism and Vogelin problematic." So Vogelin is not a good Christian, and blah 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 blah. Well, okay, that was a really crappy article, misrepresenting of things, but at the same time, it hits. It's like all these people who like this who do this kind of these attack pieces. They get a kernel of truth and then run off into crazy land with it. So back to the point that Kurlitz asks, and I don't want to. Maybe he's pissed at me by now. The sacred unity thing, I think that's correct, but I think this is more true for fascism and Nazism. Communism, the sacred unity is more kind of communal. This longing for community, this primitive community. And it's not necessarily sacred in the same way that Nazism, so I'd say the sacredness and this. All of these are actually not sacred. And the problem is it's the pagan conception of sacredness in that sense. The pagan conception of sacredity and sacredness here is this idea of that community. Again, this leads us to the Collage's conception in the ancient city. The antique city, that the political community is resting on faithfulness, piety. Religion is the glue. Religion is the glue that holds the community together, the community and the political community, whatever, because it is the thing. It's the bond that is the shared faithfulness, trust, faith. The meaning of words, the meaning of the law, the meaning of things, pistis, faithfulness, which is not about dogma. It's not about dogma. It's about, in other words, this is the big crisis of this structure. So Gachet is really interesting because Gachet's whole earlier book about how modernity wants us to, but in many ways, as Montesquieu points out in Spirit of Laws, the desacredization, the separation of the sacred and the profane, the kind of the pagan world and the most world is we're world full of spirits. The world we're around with, and the world and body is filled with the spiritual, the words of the of animus, the animus. And the gods and the divine, and that the role of the divine are everywhere in this sense. And this there's almost a kind of intimate elements of the imminent mediation of the divine in the moment in the classical world, in the sense. Christianity, what it does is it kind of desacralizes. This is why, here I understand Bonhoeffer's conception of religiousless Christianity. This is something that Menax, I think David Menax, I can't say his first name, Metaxas, the radio commentator and blogger, a video blogger who talks about things about Vogelin has written a new book on religious Christianity. This idea that Christianity is kind of a non-religion religion, it removes the, it desacralizes the natural. It moves, it's very critical of ghosts and spirits and forces of actions and things like that. In other words, it's actually even more. It makes you doubt miracles, and yes, it still affirms miracles and the power of God, but it limits the scope by which miracles are possible in that sense. Montesquieu makes a highlight about this. It's with Christianity that you kind of have a desacralization of the world by making what is holy separate from the sacred. This division of the sacred and profane, the sacred and the secular. Whereas the classical world often blurred these things highly, interconnected these things. And Gouchet wants to show that, okay, and this is where I think Gouchet differs from Manet. I think Gouchet wants to highlight that, he kind of agrees with Hans Blumenberg, that it's, in other words, Christianity starts the secularization train on motion. This is where, Hans Blumenberg's position and Vogelin kind of intersect, but they go in different directions. This was an argument that Vogelin had with Blumenberg, and there was this places where they kind of did this, but Blumenberg wanted to even argue that there was not a breach, but rather this modern position was merely a continuation of the trajectory that Christianity did, where Vogelin wants to argue that it's an alternative and false break, a Gnostic kind of trajectory to this. So is that helpful? I don't know if people can say if it's helpful or not. And we're over, and you got me. But thank you for doing this. You put the thing in there, and you asked me a couple questions, and that did help me get me kind of like energized and moved to be able to talk some more, because I was about to kill it at the end of the day. So that's it. I'm not going to. We are over an hour and a half. I'm over my hour rule. My other video probably hit out too. My current Aristotle ethics. It's on Fridays also. I've been doing it 5/5 just to try to get it released. I'm waiting for my book to show up. I'm kind of a little anxious about it. The book I'm supposed to be getting the two of the Gouchet books, 2 volumes, the French, unfortunately. So I have to go. I'll do this, and 3 and 4 will come probably after this when I get some more money in June. They're a little expensive. They're basically are over 100. They're like 30. They will be like 30 euros a pop. So I'm kind of like, do I want to get it? And there are a couple other books I should get. So that's it. If you like the videos, hit the like buttons. Please hit the like buttons. It helps the channel. I know people left. We had 5, 6 people. We've had some people come and go. Hey, what's that line from TSLAS? The women come and go, talking of Michelangelo, right? That's the problem with live streaming. They come and go. They come in here and they say, it's not that interesting, walk away. And they'll come back again, or their internet connection dropped out. So please hit the like button. It helps the channel. If you're not doing it now, do it if you're visiting here later. If you have any more comments, please put the comments in the comment section about some suggestions and things that you would like to talk about. That helps. You can hit the like button, please. So if you didn't know, we only have like buttons in this. I think maybe there'll be another like button, but say what I did wrong in that sense. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We had a couple of subscriptions we went down to. Now we got back up to a couple. We've been having some. I like to grow the channel some more, so we have to get. I want to get to 500. I want to catch the 500 mark, but even then, I probably won't get monetized because I don't get enough people watching. I need people to watch, so go binge watch. Go binge watch one of my series, people. Stay online and binge watch it. Take one of my series and go through the series and binge watch it. So why? Because this way I will get my necessary hours. So help me, people. Just do this. Yay. You want to follow me on social media, you can do so below. The links are below. I'm not that active in Minds that much. I might just have to delete Minds. I can't access it. My account kind of froze out. I was hoping Minds would work. They have a new system now. It's safer, better, but Gab is going a little. I still keep Gab. I've never been. They've kind of become more business oriented in that sense. There's still kind of that thing that's interesting. Okay, I wanted to keep Gab alive in that sense, but it was Now it's kind of going a direction that, okay, it's still Christian. It has this Christian nationalist perception, and it's very kind of, alt-righty problem. Question of now is they're anti-bot. They're trying to get rid of the bots that in there that destroy that were undermining them. They thought they created a new system, tried to make people become members to grow the channel in that sense. So we'll see what happens. I still post occasionally something. Usually I post a video I'm doing there just to keep alive there. I don't know, maybe I'm not a boomer, but I'm an Xer. I'm first generation Xer in that sense. But I still use Facebook simply because it's the easiest thing. It's just, I make it private. I don't really, not private, I keep it within friends, simply because when I make public things, I get hit by all the bots. Oh, these little Asian women or women trying to be my friend. My wife gets like, oh, what is this woman? And my wife, every time she sees one of these, women who come to, oh, can you want to maybe my friend? She gets, oh. And really, it's annoying. It's so just catfishy in that sense. So I don't like it. You get crazy people too. So I keep friends. I have some public access stuff. I'm on Twitter. It's kind of like I'm mostly posting things and occasionally responding to people. I'm not that Twitter. So you can follow me on social media. You can follow me in my academic social media links below that. You'll see what I do as a scholar and researcher and what's up. I haven't really posted anything. I'm waiting for an article to get released. It's not released yet. I'm a little anxious about it. I'm also very anxious about a journal article that I gave in January that they have not heard a damn thing back by, and I'm getting upset by this now. It's really frustrating not get any feedback at all, being told what's going on. So that's it. We can do this. And the other thing is, you want to help me do what I do, you can do so. People can subscribe to our Patreon. Please be it would be a nice one, or buy one of the books that are listed below. That's the way you can help. Well, that's it. We're over an hour and a half, 30 minutes more than I thought I'd be. Take care and have a good weekend, people. Take care. Bye-bye. See you next week.